Okay, Andrea Mazzariello, are you ready to gavel this to order?
I'm ready, Josh.
All right, gaveled. So gaveled.
Gavelled.
We're
So
following.
gavelled.
I follow Robert's Rules of Order on my podcast. So I hope you're okay with that.
I'm
Um,
not.
I,
I'm not sure what I'm agreeing to, but I trust you.
I
So
don't actually know what Robert's Rules of Order are. I just know it's why people say I motion and I second. I think
I
that's
didn't want to say I didn't know what it was. I was a little embarrassed, but you don't either. So
well. I know enough. I know more than you do, as it turns out, as to what Robert's Rules of Order is. I think it's legitimately like a thing. Like there was a way. It's a structure. It's the structure by which I think a lot of human beings approve things these days in meetings. And there's some guy whose last name or first name was Robert, and he invented it. So thanks to him, meetings take 1 hour longer than they should. Which leads me to my first question for you, Andrea Mazzariello. Coming out of the pandemic, I appreciate. Well, first of all, Andrea, thank you for joining me. Have did you? This isn't your first time?
now we did one about a year and a couple of months ago, right at the edge of lockdown. We did one, or right after lockdown had begun. I think it was maybe late March or early April or something. We did one.
Was
2020.
it officially a Corona cast?
I believe it was a Corona cast, but
Oh
I
boy.
know as much about that as I do the Roberts Rules of Order.
Well, the Corona casts were sort of like I for whatever reason walled off like 3 months of podcasts to be like this is going to be about the coronavirus that we're currently
Yeah,
experiencing, and then I moved out of that. Now I'm back to just regular old concert honesty.
neat. Well, it was in fact very much motivated by Corona, and it was in that time window. So I'm going to say that we had a Corona cast.
All right, good. Well, I don't have a specific agenda here. I think since we folks know, we've talked about who you are and what you do, and your name has come up on my off of my out of my lips on a regular basis for a long time. So I kind of am curious about jumping in and chewing some thicker fat with you if you're okay this
Yeah,
hour. I don't necessarily have an agenda as to what that fat is, but I'm kind of curious
sure.
where your head's been. And I also did request, I'm trying to do this moving forward, for you to have a question for me. And it
Yeah,
feels a bit self serving, but it's my podcast, so I can do whatever I want. Andrea.
yeah,
But
yeah.
no, but I kind of feel like I'm curious about that as a conversation starter. So we can get to that. But where's your head been? How have you been? What have you been up to?
My head has been, I think, pretty healthy. I have been trying to connect with people as much as I can, coming out of not being able to do that for so long. For example, my parents very generously bought a second place in Northfield, where I live, Northfield, Minnesota, and they came out in the fall of 2019 and they left in the winter of 2019, early winter of 2019.
Hmm.
And then everything locked down. My dad had a heart attack. Their apartment was overtaken by mold and had to be wrecked down to the studs and rebuilt.
Boom.
So until last Wednesday, I hadn't seen them in a year and a half, and it was just so good to reconnect with them. And that's been where I've been, just reconnecting and also connecting,
Hmm.
making people a real priority, trying to create a sense of space around things in order for those interactions to feel and be what they can be versus what my agenda for them might be, or where maybe I had them slotted in my overall program for the day. And that's been really, really good.
Hmm.
And on that, I've been thinking about what I wanted to ask you as far as having a connection with you and everything.
Hmm.
And I know you talked about thicker fat, wanting to get a little, maybe deeper, more unnerving, etc.
Hmm.
But maybe my question's a little softball, but it might start us off in a way that could get there. So I'm
Softball is a legitimate sport, Andrea.
not trying to say anything about softball as a sport.
Sure
I'm
sounded
using
like
the
it. Sure sounded like
sure did sound like it. All right.
it came out that way. That's fine. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I've not thought much about softball, so that probably is a problem in and of itself. Anyway, I notice in your writing and in my conversations with you,
Hmm.
we often talk about, and you often talk about, change and growth, what I know now, where I am having gone through X, Y, Z. We've talked about these conversations a lot. We can continue to talk about them.
Hmm.
But I wanted to flip it and say, rather than what would you tell your younger self, given the wisdom you have now, um, what would you tell your younger self about something that they had figured out even then? What have you sort of been like unwaveringly and confidently and with real insight, what have you known for a long time?
That's a really good question. Um,
The other one's easy, right? They're like, what would you change? It's like, oh God, like we don't have enough time. We don't have enough time in this hour or day or week or whatever.
I think I would. Well, I can answer both. Your original question is the more interesting one. What
Yeah,
was I right
yeah,
about as a young kid?
yeah.
I think I was very fortunate to have people in my life. You know, from my mom to my first percussion teacher, John Wenzel, in fifth grade, to Larry Snyder at the University of Akron, to folks like Tom Miller, who's a steel drum artist who came to my high school when I was a kid, to folks like Cliff Alexis, who's a Trinidadian steel band tuner, to my time at Ohio State, like all of these things, and then eventually leading to So Percussion. Like, I think the fundamental approach for me was always one of like somebody was in my ear early on, and I think this is something I want to sort of touch on with you actually that I want to pick your brain about because I'm getting some pushback from I'm noticing pushback from generations younger than me about the sort
Mm-hmm.
of hustle mentality,
Mm.
or the
Mm-hmm.
grind it out sort of culture in music. I had people early on in my life just being like, the reason to do gigs is because you're building a network of people that you're going to know your whole life,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, try to make money. Of course, like, yes, you got to pay your bills and be nice to buy a beer and new pair of shoes and all of the things that as a school student that you think are important.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very glad somebody told me. I was young enough, when you're young and impressionable, it's like you can either have a fully formed idea or somebody tells you something and then you take that and you're like, well, that's got to be right because an adult told me. And you're like, and then
Sure.
relying on relationships is something that I think my whole life, because of my insecurities musically, I'm not a great player, Andrea. And I can say this objectively speaking, I'm the worst player in so percussion, in terms of, and I know it's not a zero sum game, and I'm sort of being reductive about what music making is, and it's not execution all the time, but sometimes when you're playing Steve Reich or David Lang or Steve Mackey or Caroline, sometimes you got to be accurate and execute the goddamn thing. And for me, that has always, since fifth grade, I've always had the slower hands.
Mm.
I've always had to like go practice the extra hour when no one was looking. And so when I'm
Yeah.
in the room with people, that's why I lean on humor and
Mm-hmm.
just like familiarity and familial sort of
Yeah.
vibes. And so when I react against that, like right now, in my personality has had a hard time dealing with a lot of the stuff the last year because I think I'm right about that. I think
Mm-hmm.
I'm right that your human interactions, your relationships, for better or worse, whether or not somebody said something inappropriate to you one day. If I cut everybody out of my life and never played a gig with anybody who said something inappropriate around me or to me or about somebody that I didn't know, I'd have zero people in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've always, and it's not to say like you need to just defer and give the floor to someone who's being a dick, but I think having a slightly more nuanced decision making process about that is something that I've just had beat in me from day one.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad because now, as a 41-year-old, I'm around a lot of people who aren't the best musicians in New York. They're all people who have prioritized building relationships. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
part of my friend field is people like Joan Tower, it's Steve Reich, it's Caroline Shaw, it's all like it's not like I have like a generational family.
Right.
That's my generation. Like there's World War II vets. I am friends with people who lost kids in Sandy Hook, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not uninterested in ever being in the room with Alex Jones just to be like, "Can you talk to me?"
Mm-hmm.
Like I
You're
think
not uninterested, or you're not,
I'm
you
not
know,
uninterested.
got
Like
it.
I'm not
Got
willing to
it.
throw anybody out with the bathwater if I don't have to. And
Mm-hmm.
so anyway, and I'm not to say that that doesn't complicate things and there's not issues that arise from that particular approach, but on the whole, I think 19-year-old Josh was right by taking every gig that I could because I might
Mm-hmm.
meet somebody that I might need 25 years later.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the pushback that you're getting is about treating the hustle more what? More logistically, more.
I think it's misdiagnosing what the results, like what your payment, what the currency of the hustle is.
Hmm.
I think
Right.
sometimes, like, there's a push, I saw there was a push online to start a database of every gig that you've been hired for, to put up all of the information, like how much you got paid,
Sure.
who paid you, how, like all of the specs about that stuff. And I understand, like I understand the
Right.
impetus to why to want to learn that information. It's also reading an incomplete data set and drawing conclusions from it. Like hiring in music, it's just like it, how that stuff happens is so tricky. And so like every gig I've played a lot of gigs for tips.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I feel like as a teacher, if I encourage my students to play for tips, that I'm actually being unethical.
Hmm.
And I think I'm right about it. I think I'm right.
Hmm.
19-year-old
Hmm.
Josh would not be in So Percussion if I didn't play for tips outside of Angel Falls Coffee Shop for a year. You know why I know that? Because I'm Josh Quillen and I experienced it. And it's not like if I had taken one less gig, I wouldn't be in So, or if I had taken four more gigs, I'd be in a better group than So.
Hmm.
My approach though is what led me to be in So. So it's a little frustrating when students are just like, I don't want to, like, I should be paid union scale every time I play a gig.
Hmm.
Okay, I think there's a lot of basketball players who feel they should be paid like Michael Jordan or LeBron James, but you've played one professional basketball game. He's played thousands. Like there
Right.
there there is a, I just think it's slipperier than just saying I didn't get paid $192.57 for this
Hmm.
1 hour service. Therefore the system is fucked and I think we need to burn the system down. It's like
Mm. Yeah, I
it's
understand what
tricky.
you're saying. I've often felt like when I look at um folks that are younger than me who are composing. I mean, by and large, I'm really encouraged by what people are doing,
Mm-hmm.
saying, thinking. I'm really encouraged by that. I noticed in myself a few years ago a bit of an allergy to what I thought of as professionalization at a very early point
Mm-hmm.
in the game, and I don't necessarily feel as frustrated by that as I did then. Then I thought, wow, this is cart before the horse kind of stuff. Like
Mm-hmm.
just focus on your craft, put your head down, build your community, not network, but community, right? And then everybody rises and everything sort of works itself out. But I started to look back at my own suspicions of that from my current vantage point as a person who has a really good job during the year and a really good job during the summer. And I can't honestly say that because I played for free outside a department store in Brooklyn, which I did. And lots of really, took a lot. I played a lot of, empty rooms. Um, I think that was really, really important, like you're saying. But I also don't think that there are a lot of jobs like the one I have to go around, and I can just say, this is the path to get there, and I did it this way, so it'll also work for you. I understand people feeling like, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
there's a mountain to climb here. I'm not sure that that's exactly what you're saying though,
Well, it's for
Josh.
me
About
the tricky thing I think I'm trying to wrap my head around is I think I'm trying to hold I think I want to have the right to hold two separate thoughts in my head. One is
yeah,
you've
yeah,
asked me how I got to where I got to, and I'm telling you it was
mm-hmm.
5,000 days of decision making and 10,000 hours of practicing 12 hours a day
Mm-hmm.
at Yale, locking myself in a
Mm-hmm.
room and not
Mm-hmm.
going to parties when I wanted to. Not that I
Mm-hmm.
never did, but like not doing a lot of the things, being away from family. Like now, like yeah, it's a grind and it fucking blows. Like what? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Why do you think this is awesome? That's my problem. Is like I think you think this is awesome, 100% of the time.
Right.
Walking on stage at Carnegie is a blast. It's an honor. It's a privilege. I'm standing on the same stage as Paul Robeson and
Mm-hmm.
Judy Garland and like heavies and Harry Belafonte and like yeah, it's not lost on me.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I'm comfortable standing where Paul Robeson and Harry Belafonte stood is because I've played in the stone when the air conditioner is broken 15 times.
Right.
You've played there once and you are like this is an inappropriate work environment. Yeah. Yes it is.
Hmm.
But it's ours. You know. And the other thing is just like all right, I don't think, I mean, John Zorn isn't a billionaire, and the stone isn't rocket science. It's a shitty room. Or at least I don't even know where it is now, but it's like, so do your own thing. Like,
Hmm.
make a thing, do a thing. And I'm a little confused by the, like, I think fear shuts a lot of people down real quick. And then like, it becomes this, like, well, these things are doing this thing, and I can't possibly do that thing. It's like, well, you're missing the process.
Mm.
Arnold Schwarzenegger doesn't look like he looks like because well, he might have taken steroids, but there's just a lot of like boring boring arm curls, like, and I feel like I'm trying to have the thing as a teacher of like, you got to do the boring arm curls.
Hmm. That's interesting. I mean, so I think composition is a little bit different in a way.
Hmm.
Like, you know, practice making eighth notes with your pencil over and over again until they look perfect isn't really a thing that I advise. So I think it's a little bit different than developing a physiological approach to an instrument. But I often say that, to use the Arnold Schwarzenegger example, which I've never used, and I don't know if this is true, but I bet that there was something about those arm curls that really lit that guy up. And that if you find the thing that makes all your neurons fire and that feels really good, the line between like labor and pleasure is a little bit blurrier.
Mm.
And so I wonder a little bit about this idea of like muscling it through or doing something that doesn't feel good, et cetera, et cetera. I kind of think the human body and the human mind is a pretty good, if we could clear out all the noise, calibrator of having found a thing to do that will be ultimately healthy and pleasurable and blissful, et cetera. I used the example at SoSI a couple of years ago of the time my son was drawing rockets. I didn't tell him, hey, to draw a good rocket, you got to draw like 100 rockets in the next week. But he drew 100 rockets. It's not because he wanted to get good at drawing rockets, it's because something about drawing rockets really got him going, right? So I wonder a little bit about, I personally, in my teaching, wonder about advising younger composers and students to disregard that flag that's like, this kind of sucks, you know? I reserve also the right to hold two things in mind at once, though, because it's not to say that these things aren't difficult, but if the prerequisite condition, i.e., I found my rocket ship drawing, is true, then you'll make a whole lot of rockets when the air conditioner is broken or when you don't have the color crayon that you want or whatever.
Hmm.
So I take your point, and first of all, I love the idea of like both things can be true. This is something that I'm really, really into as far as discovering my own binary thinking patterns,
Mm.
saying, is it really the case that it's either or in this case? I just wrote an essay last week that was about the way that I often hear people say something and you can tell they would say but instead they say and, because it's kind of a thing.
Hmm.
You say and in a kind of deliberate way, and it communicates that the idea of a fork in the road has been replaced by something bigger. I really, really like this idea.
Hmm.
And so when I find myself in moments where I want two things to be true, it's like, yeah, yes. When I find myself in those moments, um, I wonder if it's either or, and I think it's both. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah, and it's one of the things too that, again, like, all of this is in the context of, I'm 41 on June 29th, 2021, and I also reserve the
Whoa,
right.
that's tomorrow.
No, no, no. Right now I'm 41.
No,
I'll
that's
be
today. I thought you
today.
were telling me your birthday was tomorrow,
My
even though
birthday's
today's the 29th. I'm
No,
the
my birthday is
worst.
July 11th. I'm good. I still got a while till I'm 42. But and by a
Not
while
that
I mean
long.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Happy birthday, pal.
Thanks, buddy.
Today
I
and
don't
then.
feel a day over 75.
You look good for 75.
But I also want to reserve the right to be able to change my mind tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the other thing too that I think is a little frustrating with. I'm having this sort of like, what was I like as a student? When you ask me that question of like, what did you
Yeah,
get right? I'm just like, boy, was I the
yeah.
student that I'm currently being driven crazy by?
Oh yeah, I was.
And I don't think
Yeah.
I don't think I was. I generally, I don't want to say subservient, but I was very much a submissive student in the sense that, like, at least when I was going to school, the overall and especially as a kid coming from Ohio going to Yale,
Yeah.
like, I was like, I can't believe they're letting me pay
Yeah.
$22,000 to
Yeah.
come here.
Pour
So
the things in my brain that you have.
yeah, so I was just like, even if
Yeah.
it's crazy and I think you're nuts, like, just dump it in and I'll sort it out later. And I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
served me well, and that's, I wish more students would sort of just not see college as an a la carte service
Uh-huh.
oriented
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
experience, like where
Yeah,
you're
and
plugging
not
in.
a customer work, because then we become customer service folk
Exactly.
in a way. Look, there's nothing wrong with doing customer service work, right? I mean, I've done that work too, but uh, higher ed, college, university life feels like if it's driven by earnestness and curiosity, we don't get into the same kinds of tangles as if it's driven by, um, I would like to purchase this widget from you kind of
Well,
stuff.
that's the problem. I mean, I think where where performing musicians and composition processes overlap is the sense of, like, it's not a results oriented thing necessarily, because
Mm-hmm.
what are the results?
Process. Yeah.
Yeah, what
Yeah.
are the results? You have a piece. Well, that piece isn't actually anything until it's played, and then it
Mm-hmm.
becomes the rest of the thing that you want it to be.
Yeah.
And then even that, but then what if that's a bad experience? What if it doesn't go well?
Yeah.
What if the audience
Yeah.
hates it? Okay, but maybe part of the process is to then get up the next day and perform it again.
Sure.
And then the
Yeah, I
next
mean,
day.
I
And that's how, like, where you, when you say that, like, this sucks as the sort of barometer for whether or not you're doing the right or the wrong thing, like,
mhm.
sometimes the thing that sucks is the way to sharpen your axe to actually do the thing you want to be doing. And, like, for me, it's like 2 a.m. load-ins of Bobby Previtt's Terminals was enough. I genuinely thought about quitting.
Yeah,
That load-in is so bad and the gear is so extensive that you feel like complete dog shit when you're playing it.
yeah,
But it's also awesome, and I got to play with John Medeski.
and it's
So
also awesome.
yeah, so like for me, it's like that sucky part. Yeah, it's part of it.
Yeah,
So how? But again, it's like it's an individual thing how you judge that. I'm saying I'm glad I stuck with it,
I hear you.
and I feel like sometimes students don't trust me that I'm glad. you
No,
know.
trust is the word that I was thinking about, and reciprocally, I want to trust my students to know when they're in a situation that is not productive. And so, for me to say you should trust me more than you trust yourself about this particular situation, that's hard. I mean, I generally think that I put a lot of trust in my students, and I encourage them to go back to what you said a moment ago about products, to think about a score or a recording or whatever it's going to be as evidence of practice and process, and
Mhm.
not the product of practice and process. And I think there's kind of a difference there, that a piece exists shows what that you were doing this thing. It just sort of fell out. It's a symptom of practice. It's a symptom of process. That has been my kind of like guiding light these past few years, because I think I was really, really product oriented when I was a student. If you'd asked me that question about what was I sure about then, I don't know what I would have said, because I was a disaster, arrogant, um, insecure. Of
Mm.
course, those things travel with each other. Really,
Mm.
really intense and driven,
They're
but in
good
ways that,
bedfellows. Those two qualities are good
yeah,
bedfellows.
it's like two sides of the coin, right? I mean, it was awful. I would hate teaching myself,
Well, let me ask
really,
you,
really would.
some of the things for me as a student, again, like I want to be careful here to not have anecdotal experiences be proof of how a
Yeah.
general practice should be done. But again, like the things that have taught me the most about myself and what I actually believe are the moments when someone said, I need you to hold my hand and jump.
Mm.
You got it.
Hmm.
I've jumped off this cliff a million times and I know right, yeah, it looks, there's rocks everywhere, but I know right where to jump. So we go right through the rocks into the deepest part of the water.
Yeah.
And it was terrifying. Sometimes I got hurt. Sometimes you trust somebody and you make the wrong call and you hit
Hmm.
the rocks. But man, when it's done right, when it's done well, and that needle is threaded of like, okay, trust me here, and you hit that water
Hmm.
and you come out the other end,
Yeah.
Sometimes it teaches you how to trust yourself. I don't th- I
Yeah.
think sometimes as a human you don't know, trusting yourself is a process too. And you
Hmm.
that's a process to learn, and sometimes having somebody else be like, "You don't know how to trust yourself yet. Come on stage with me. Trust me, you're not going to die." I've had tons of students who've come, "No, no, I'm not going to play pieces of wood with you guys." That's no.
Hmm.
And I'm like, "Just trust me. I'm good
Yeah.
enough to cover for whatever things might go wrong with you." Why? Because I've played this piece 1,500 times. So
You gotta play that piece a lot.
trust me. And then they
Yeah.
do, and it's a little bumpy, and then it works itself out. And afterwards, they're like, "Oh, that wasn't bad." It's like, "Yeah, I know, because why you didn't trust me."
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so, but you can't also, as a teacher, approach every situation like that.
Right.
But
Right.
when it's done well, I feel like I don't know.
Yeah, the cool thing about composition is it happens in slow motion, so I don't have to have
Mm.
that moment, really. I don't have to get into risk in a moment like that. There are risks to trotting a piece out, especially if I think, well, that might not work. But oddly enough, the process that you describe of I'll be able to cover for the thing that goes wrong in a weird way, composition is so exposed. And it's
Mm.
like, I have been working with you on this. I think that this works and this doesn't. You may see that, you may not. The only way for us to know together is to put this thing up there, to take that risk, to trust not even necessarily each other, but trust that the process we worked through was worthwhile. And then we have a little bit more. You talked about data sets before. We have a little bit
Hmm.
more to plug back into our next go, you know?
I remember,
It happens slow.
yeah, I
Happens
remember
real slow.
we were on when we were working on the Concerto Man Made by David Lang. He talked a lot about his experience working with orchestras, and
Yeah,
like in terms of his at bats with orchestras, and
sure.
learning the sort of economy of like, all right, where's my artistic vision? Where's their artistic ability? And where's the clock?
Yep, yep,
And where's the
yep.
stage manager with that clock taped to the music stand that's gonna get everybody out of there? And how do I navigate that? And so David's like, yeah, early on I would write these pieces and they'd be super hard and nobody could play them and everybody would be pissed at me. And he's like, I wouldn't be happy with my work. They weren't happy with my work. And he's like, over 40 years or 30 years or whatever, he's like, this piece, I know how to write so that it sounds way harder than it is.
Hmm.
So that they feel like they're playing super hard music. It sounds really hard, but it's not. And like, now, again, not to say that everybody needs to write music like that, but if I think as a student, if you want to traffic in the orchestra world,
Hmm.
it's a different skill set than if you want to traffic in the solo clarinet world
Hmm.
or the percussion quartet world. There's just
Hmm.
it's a different set of tools you need to come in and sort of build that building.
Hmm.
And so how do you
Yeah,
talk to
that's
your
definitely true.
students who are like, I want to write an orchestra piece? And like the first thought that would be going through my head is like, danger, Will Robinson, danger, danger, danger. You're going to have 20 minutes on a 30-minute piece.
Yeah,
Like
that's
Steve
right.
Mackey talked about a piece that was premiered at Carnegie Hall. This was like 5 or 6 years ago. And he's just like, yeah, the piece was 30 minutes and they gave me 20. So I had to figure out what parts to rehearse, you know, and just trust they could sight read the rest of it.
Yeah. Well, when someone brings something to me, I mean, my most common thing is like, I don't know, let's learn about that, right?
Mm-hmm,
Because I don't have any at bats with orchestras. I mean, I do from when I was a student, have a couple of things
mm-hmm,
and et cetera. I mean, I've worked a lot with you guys. I've worked a lot with other percussionists. I write a lot of solo music, a lot of small music, and I write a lot for myself. Um, and so in a sense, I have to know as a teacher, not to make it completely idiosyncratic and personal, but I need to know as a teacher where the limits of my knowledge sort of cease and think about that reality that you've got the ask on paper, you've got the ability, as you said, and you've got the situation that is bounded. And so, how do you teach somebody to make those negotiations in a composition lesson? On some level, you don't. You don't. You bake the reality of what they're doing into the process and the practice that we talked about. But if you both believe that the score is evidence of practice and isn't the end of the story, and that moment when you're on stage with the orchestra for 20 minutes for your 30-minute piece at Carnegie Hall is really important. There's a conflict there. There's a conflict between music as something that arises as a result of you doing good things for yourself in your studio, and then music that's going to as you said earlier, have some currency and traction in the world as something people can listen to and engage and think about and write think pieces about and
Hmm.
like and walk out and all these other kinds of things, right? Um, and so what I don't want to do is send people into a situation where they don't realize what the stakes are, right? Back to what we talked about with risk and trust. Part of what I need to do is communicate what the risks are, even what the risks are of studying with me, because there are. I don't teach like everybody, I teach like me. And you got to be honest about the limits of your own knowledge and perspective and experience. Um, I think students find it frustrating sometimes too, where they're like, wait, so we're gonna do this together? And the
Hmm.
answer is yeah. I'm not coming down from a mountain. I'm down here with you trying to work things out. I'm just trying to learn these things for myself. I'm trying to have a process that's healthy for me, right? I want to get up in the morning and think like, yeah, this feels really good. I want to sit down at an instrument or at my notebook with a pen and feel like what just happened was really, really special and engaging and um, leads to more things that have the same tenor, that have the same affective value for me.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
I mean, I thought of another to your original question for me about like what did you get right. There was a
yeah,
thing I used to say, and I think it started when I was in grad school, mainly because I think now in hindsight I was absolutely reacting to the culture of at the time,
mm-hmm.
which when I was in grad school and in undergrad too was very much a like you are here to it's like you're in the farm team to be either an orchestra player or a solo performer or a college teacher.
Mm-hmm.
If you
Mm-hmm.
don't do any of those, then maybe you get to the minor leagues, you can be a band director. Like those were
Mm-hmm.
the things, right? And everything was like, if you're not doing every teacher, or that not every teacher, but a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
teachers I had were like paranoid about what their students were doing, and it's like, oh, my student's working here, and my student got this job here, and it gave me a lot of anxiety just to be like, well, I don't,
Yeah,
because part of me was just like, I barely am able to figure it out for myself. Why do I have to care about everybody other students' career too? Like, so
yeah.
what I used to say, I think I started saying when I started teaching at NYU, which was really my first like collegiate teaching experience on any level, was like, I don't have any interest in any of you being professional musicians at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I can't promise you that. I can't get you, I mean, I might be able to get you a gig down the line, but I can't promise you now that you're going to have X, Y, or Z job because I
Mm-hmm.
barely have that job, and you are telling me
Mm-hmm.
that I have the job you want and I barely have it. So like let me dispel a little bit of the where you think you're headed here. But I do have an interest in you being an interesting human being and being
Yeah.
someone who can think through things. Maybe you're not going to be a professional steel drummer, but your experiences in a steel band are going to teach you how to be a better accountant. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and when you put my name down as a letter for a letter of reference, I will write you a letter of reference for any job, musically or non,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what you can look to me for. If you come to me
Mm-hmm.
because you want a job running a steel band or playing a percussion quartet, don't waste your time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know how to do it other than the one single way I figured out for myself, and I'm not giving it up because baby got bills to pay. You know,
Yeah.
like like
Not only that, but it couldn't work. It's a different world,
it's
right?
a
I mean,
different
it's
work.
every moment we're in a different reality. So like how I got my job or whatever we're talking about isn't going to be relevant to anybody's experience. It's not by definition. It can't be. How could it be? Right?
Right, and I used to think when I would say that I would feel guilty because I felt like I was abdicating my responsibility to
Sure.
students. But I think I was starting to notice this transactional sort of culture in college where
Right.
I mentioned the a la carte sort of vibe, where now students, because of the culture of the teachers that were coming before them, now have an expectation that if I get this degree program from Yale, I will have a job in So Percussion, or I will
Yeah.
get a job with an orchestra because that's what the advertisements say. And I feel like I want to change the billboard a little bit and be like,
Right.
come study come be an apprentice and learn how to make a violin with Stradivarius.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not. I don't care if you make money making violins. You're coming to learn a
Mm-hmm.
process.
Mm-hmm. I have a great job, I have to say, because our students, I don't know how they do it here, but there is some serious generosity of spirit around these parts. It
Good.
is, it is like, um, so rare that I feel like someone's being, as you said, a la carte before, is so rare in the classroom here. I mean, it's just the culture is of just earnest interest, passion. I mean, the one thing that I sort of complain about, the one sticking point here is the kind of the culture of busyness and specifically of projecting one's busyness. And I
Mm-hmm.
fall into this a lot. I've been trying really, really hard to look at that. There's a way that it's some kind of virtue to be overwhelmed when really it's like bad planning or or something.
Or particular circumstances.
Or
Yeah,
circumstances
like
that you've got to kind of move through. Absolutely. The kind of overwhelm I'm talking about though is like I'm overscheduled. I'm placing demands on myself that aren't realistic. I'm not talking about the kinds of weights that some folks carry that are real. That my job is to set down some of that burden to the extent that I can in the latter case. In the former case, though, I think there's a sort of cultural shift that I would like to be a part of in all the institutions that I touch that are like, we are going to be deeply engaged in what we're doing because we want to be, because we know that it's good for us, not because we have to, not because we need to get to XYZ point or anything like that. Uh,
well,
we talked about privilege in the Corona cast, and I think
mm-hmm,
this is
mm-hmm.
this is adjacent to that conversation too, where um, far be it for me to say like you need to relax or something like that is not something that I need to be telling people, um, at least in the way that it is usually transacted, right? Because I'm sitting in a really comfortable place, and I realize that, and I'm grateful for that, and I try to use that comfort to. It's going to sound really hokey, but um, help people, help to make things better, try to say things that I heard this thing with a songwriter who was talking about how songwriters have a responsibility to people. And I was like, that is such a great way to think about this, that you have a responsibility to give a listener a language to understand things they might go through and be incapable of articulating or not even realize are happening. You create this language for understanding one's emotional, kind of affective or spiritual reality, and you're
Mm-hmm.
responsible for that. And I really that idea is really wonderful to me, and I hope it's true. I really do. I really hope that things that I can make or do or say can actually create a sympathetic vibration with somebody's experience, and they'll think, oh yeah, me, I feel like that sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and thank you for seeing it, and thank you for showing that making something of it um, can be kind of a way to short circuit a process that's difficult.
I want to put a pin in something you said and just highlight it for
Yeah.
folks, or and use so as an example to highlight what you're saying. Like one of the things when you mentioned the what it is about yourself that you find joy in and
Yeah.
solace, and then how that butts up against the other human in the room with you and what brings
Yeah.
them peace and solace and satisfaction. And sometimes doing a shitload of busy work, actually somebody walks out at the end of the day and it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
For other people, that's misery. In So Percussion, the four of us are four wildly different people who all have different work habits
Mm-hmm.
that are all objectively obsessive in their own unique way. Yeah, I'm 16 years into it and I cannot not reply to an email
Mm-hmm.
because some part of me somewhere believes that there's a like, I see you in a
Mm-hmm.
response to an email.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know that you've put time in this email, so I want to just say, I saw it. I got you, buddy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it also means that everybody gets 4,000 emails every time they send an email, like, and, but Adam and Jason, Eric is much more quietly obsessive and is like very organized, like everything. But over time, we have grown to stop pushing on each other's obsessive qualities and allow it to do the thing that it does naturally. Like sometimes a vine is just going to always grow up a thing, and every time you cut it off, the vine's just going to grow right back up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I've learned to allow that for Eric, and he's learned to allow that for me. And there's just
Mm-hmm.
they've stopped making fun of me when I respond, got it. for 5 years they did because it drove them crazy, and now they, I think maybe it still drives them crazy, but they understand why my particular crazy, it's important for me to feel like I'm allowed to have that in the room.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just a sort of a like, you're going to come across people who are like Elon Musk, who just are like, I'm gonna make batteries and electric cars and put one in space. And what it requires to do that is a skill set I don't have, and a drive that I don't have, or some sort of obsessive quality about your personality or whatever it is.
Hmm.
You're going to come up against people. I've been obscenely close in my life to LeBron James. That's about as close to a like statistical anomaly of a human being as you can possibly have. And you just like, but he's in the same classroom with 17 other high school kids. He's just the one that's shooting free throws for
Hmm.
5 hours after class. Yeah, he's taller than everybody, but no one else is shooting free throws. He's not going in and
Yeah.
dunking for 5 hours. He's going in and shooting free throws. And then he backs up and shoots 3 pointers for another 3 hours. Like, sometimes you're going to have people like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're going to have people on your team like John Paxton, who's just going to be the white guy that's always going to bury the three. He's never going to dunk. And so I feel like that's something I'm learning. I don't have the answer, but I'm learning the older I get to just allow a little bit for the idea that somebody in the room is always going to be faster than me, is always going to
Hmm.
be smarter
Hmm.
than me, is going to get the
Hmm.
idea quicker. Jason is always going to play polyrhythms exponentially better than me for at least 3 or 4 weeks before I get close enough to me being able to play it so that if you squint at us, it sounds close. Like,
Hmm.
it drives me nuts.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's where I am right now, and so allowing for that, that sort of dissonance is important. How to
I think that's
teach?
right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say how to teach people how to deal with that dissonance as a student, because I wish had been taught how to deal with that earlier. I wish there was like a class where it was like, hey, we're going to set this up where you have two. We're going to pair up people who maybe don't work well together as just a like, or we're going to give you at bats on writing for an orchestra.
Right.
Like, you're not going to get a premiere, but we're going to hire an audience to come in. They're going to come in at 1, 3, 5, and 7. There's a show. They're going to clap and then take their $35 and walk out. It's like jury duty, right? And you're going to get that experience so that when you get with the New York Phil or Waterbury Symphony or whatever it is, you don't have
Hmm.
that fear. But
Yeah.
there's no infrastructure for that. It's all, we're going to talk about the German or the Neapolitan six chord
Hmm. Hmm.
and the
Yeah.
Tristan
Yeah.
chord. You know,
Mm. I like that Tristan chord. I'll tell you what.
it's a good one. There's a
um.
reason it's around for as long as it has been. You know, it's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that it has that name too. It actually has a name. I was thinking a little bit about the way you were talking about everybody's obsessive nature and how vines can. It's at some point you just have to let the vine grow.
Mhm.
I think that's really, really smart to think about relationship that way, that you are thinking about not only what's the best of everybody, but what's the worst of everybody, what's the complicated of everybody. And the way that those things come into congruence is really, really important. And it leads me to think about things like finding your compositional voice, et cetera, or even your voice as a performer, not so much as dealing in absolutes. Like if they're, I have a great single stroke roll and I can play polyrhythms and I can do this. It's not so much the sort of items that you can achieve, et cetera. It's more like comic books or something where, oh, you're like really, really fast and
Yes,
you
yeah.
can you can burn things with your eyes, and and so as a teacher you're maybe more like Professor X than you are like Stradivarius teaching you how to do the one thing you know how to do. It's more like, how can I enable you to think about your specific idiosyncratic gift? And now it starts to sound like I'm talking about branding or something, which I'm
No,
not
but
exactly. There's a
as you're saying it though,
Do you
but
know what
it's
I'm saying?
yeah, but as a teacher, sorry, I love The Watchmen. That was or Watchmen, excuse me. That was one of my
Yeah.
favorite
Yeah.
COVID watches was Watchmen. But as a teacher, sometimes you are by default Dr. Manhattan, where you are in your timeline, but also every point in your life is as vivid to you, and every experience you've had, every failure is you see it in real time. And so
Sure.
when a student's in front of you and they look at you and they're just like, yeah, I booked a gig playing a 3 hour pan gig. I'm like, cool. Do you have a real book? What's a real book? And that's where I'm like Dr. Manhattan. I flash back to 17, 18-year-old Josh taking my first gig and being like, oh my God, I don't know what that 7 means by that G chord. And being like, oh, no, don't take that gig. Don't take that gig. Take it. Turn it down. Turn it down. Turn it down. And they're just like, I'm really pumped. And I'm like, oh my God. And so that's like, as Dr. Manhattan, I can look back to the past and see the future and know what's going to happen. And I feel like, what's my responsibility there? The comic book thing really cracked something open for me. That was good.
Oh, all the music that I love, I don't love because of absolutes. I think I used to. I think I used to think, wow, that's like really like incredible counterpoint. That's like the best counterpoint. Or like, I had this video of I had these drummer videos growing up, I practice, get inspired, et cetera. And I had the Dave Weckl video, and he does a single stroke roll. It's just, I mean, it's like nothing I've ever seen before. It's like pitched, just like, wah, it's so fast.
It's like sand on tissue paper.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. And I was really attracted to that. And my dad's a pianist, concert pianist. I was really, really attracted to what he could pull off technically.
Mm-hmm.
I started to think more about it as I got older and stuff. And the music I most loved was the music that most sounded like somebody, not like something that was objectively, measurably more successful or virtuosic, but like somebody, like, wow, you listen to Art Blakey play the drums and you're like, okay, that's him,
But you look at musicians. I mean, this is the other thing too, that I think we're bad as human beings, and why I feel like it's important. I'm trying to force myself to think of people in history in terms of days, not years or generations, because John Coltrane was who he was because he can, at the drop of a hat, play any chord in any inversion in any key, because he practiced out of a book obsessively. Now, if you want to be John Coltrane, you got to do that. But then, but you also can look at people like, we look at a guy like Tchaikovsky, and over time, our negativity bias has sort of like tried to squeeze out all of the possible things and turned him into this, like, maybe negativity bias is the wrong word, but this desire to sort of see history as a like clean box. Oh, Tchaikovsky, like he's a, at the time being gay was really hard, right? For Tchaikovsky, like, we're talking about that a lot right now. Like, what if we studied Tchaikovsky in looked at his music and tried to hear what he was writing in the context of a guy who was incredibly troubled and could not, like, let's look at a guy like, I don't know, like, I feel like over time we see, look at Bach, like, yeah, he had a gig every Sunday. He also had 23 kids. How many do you have, Andrea? 2?
Big announcement, Josh. I have 23.
You have 23. But like, so like,
I've got 2, but I do have a dog now. Did we talk about this?
Yes, I think we've talked about that. But my larger point is, I think seeing this stuff as like, I'm a little exhausted of seeing these things as binary, as a 1 or a 0.
Yeah.
Either Tchaikovsky was great or he's part of white supremacy. Either Beethoven is great or he's part. It's like, no. Like, he's part. Either John Coltrane is great or he's a jazzer. It's like, no. He's right up there with Beethoven. So is Miles Davis. So why? Because these were all folks toiling away, grinding it out.
Yeah, you're coming back a lot to this idea of the grind, like shooting free throws for 5 hours, this kind of thing. No, it's interesting, man. It's not something that it's something I try not to think about and put on myself, to be honest.
Why do you think that is?
Because I tortured myself with it for a really long time in ways that weren't super healthy, and that I watch my kiddos and I think, it's really hard to hold a violin bow. It's really hard to get it up high enough on your shoulder. Are you not interested in that? Because if you're not interested in that, let's not do that. Is really how I'm feeling about it. Because there's something that's going to light you up inside. LeBron James didn't shoot those free throws and hate it. I'm sure. I will die on this hill. He was doing that because it was doing something for him. It was feeding him. It was nourishing, right? I'm not interested in making people grind through things that they don't find nourishing, or to get back to the vine and the obsessiveness that doesn't lock into your personality in some way. Now, you can lock into your neurosis through your practice, or you can lock into your best self through your practice. And you can lock into your best self through your practice. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And for a long time, I think I fed a beast, a demon that I could not control with my practice. That was really real. And that's not something I want to do anymore. And if it means that I'm worse, if it means that my career doesn't go as far, if it means that I'm obscure, so be it. But I will not make that deal anymore. I just won't. Um,
Well, it's
that's
inter-
not the same for everybody, though, right?
yeah.
That's not everybody. Not everybody is gonna obsess to the point that they break. You
Well,
know.
but I think I want to stick with the grind thing because I think what you're doing is adapting your grind. I mean, that's the other thing too, that like I don't ever want anybody to think like, oh, just sorry, you just got to do it this one way the whole time.
Yeah.
Sorry, if it never
Yeah.
works for you, sorry, that just means it doesn't work for you. It's like, no, no, no. Like, adapt your grind, but
Yeah.
get out there and keep. You have it like you're born with an axe, and by the time when you're 90, I want to have a whole set of scalpels that I've chiseled out of that one axe.
Hmm.
So that I
Hmm.
can know exactly where to cut and only cut out the things that I want to cut out.
Yeah.
And
I hear what you're saying on that. I do, but I just to push back a little. I just worry a little bit about the language of like suffering through it or muscling through it or whatever, because from personal experience, that was a disaster, like capital D disaster. It it's adapting your grind. We could sort of tweak the language a little bit and talk about. So maybe my grind right now is like I take a long walk with my dog and I make a smoothie. And that
okay.
doesn't sound like the grind, right? But that's what I need to do to keep myself up and going and making music and stuff. Like I play music that I really, really enjoy. I'm definitely not the best at any of the things that I do. And what I'm actually looking for is my idiosyncratic kind of flavor, not my Dave Weckl single stroke roll.
Hmm.
But I'm pretty sure that when Dave Weckl practiced those single stroke rolls, he wasn't like, I'm grinding out. It was more just like, oh my, that feels nice in my brain. For some reason, my body can do this, right? Again, not binary, not always, but there was a reward there. There was a
Hmm.
reward that was real, that was palpable, that encouraged him to keep going and do more because you can't get that good without it. You just can't. You can't muscle your way to that good.
Well, the thing I
You
want
know?
to highlight here, and again, like I'm not, we're having a friendly push back and forth here. Like I think the issue sometimes with a lot of people is seeking other people's rewards.
Yeah, yeah, that's
like
totally
like
right.
I don't
That
want
is
Dave
totally right.
I don't want Dave Weckel's snare drum roll, but as a 17-year-old kid, I think I need it. And so then I'm just like, well,
Mm-hmm,
if Dave Weckel's doing it this way, then I should do it. I gotta practice 12 hours a day. And it's like, Jason
mm-hmm,
Truding,
mm-hmm.
he needs to practice 1 hour for every six of mine. I know I'm not saying that to blow smoke up his ass or make me look like a dummy. It's just true. It's true. In order for
Mhm.
him to get to me to get to the same level as Jason, I have to work harder. Now, if we're playing a steel drum piece, it's
Yeah,
reversed. I can
yeah,
sight read it, Jason cannot.
right.
And I think seeking other people's rewards is a bad idea and will lead you
Mm-hmm,
nowhere all the time,
mm-hmm,
other than to other people's rewards, which you'll
mm-hmm,
realize are theirs and not yours, and they don't
mm-hmm,
want them. They don't want to let them go. The other thing I want to say that as a way of pushing back on you, is bring back your comic book analogy, is that
mm-hmm,
one of the things I feel that I love about comic books is that their trauma is their superpower, becomes
mm-hmm,
their superpower. And they always have a weakness. There's like kryptonite, or there's something that will bring them down at the end of the day. But it's this their greatest insecurity is the thing that they then can reverse and turn into the superpower. And I have felt like for me, I've always wanted to strive to turn every traumatic moment of my life, whether it be my dad's death or a bad tour experience or a great concert, to
mm-hmm,
turn those moments of like, whoa, something happened, as like I'm just gonna put that in my bag and I'm gonna wield it as a cape. It's no
mm-hmm.
longer a hindrance. At least if I have that mindset, I'm more apt to actually succeed than I am to say I give up.
No, I mean, I think it's great to be able to look at an experience that's difficult and make it into your, X-ray vision, whatever. Um, I would feel a little strange telling somebody to um, putting it on somebody to not only process whatever it is. People have gone through things that are way worse than things that I've gone through, but I feel weird putting it on somebody and saying like, you know what, you could turn this objectively awful thing into a strength and then sort of expect that or whatever. It's probably true in some way that things can be kind of recuperated and can become strengths. I mean, I think I do believe that. But in terms of looking at kids today with how they think about the grind, like that doesn't feel like it's part of that doesn't feel like part of the conversation entirely.
Mm.
Especially when you think about what kind of burdens people really do carry, and I don't know. I don't, let's, I'm going to say that actually, I don't actually know. I don't actually know how to, um, you know, in a way that's healthy for them, talk to a student about profoundly difficult, use the word traumatic experiences, and encourage them to turn it into like a superpower, whatever. Like I just don't know. I mean, there's
Well, this is let me give a tiny example. Like, what is the there are sometimes you've been to therapy, I've been to therapy. Like,
yeah.
sometimes your trauma is misplaced, and your reaction to the stimulus in the environment is causing you to then cycle out of control and view that thing as overly important
Mm-hmm.
to your actual life.
Mm-hmm.
As a teacher, that can manifest itself in simple performance anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
where the mere act of making someone play a show is so destructive that they burst into tears.
Mm-hmm.
If you are studying with me and you've told me you want to be on a stage, this is where it goes back to the like hold my hand and jump.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to agree that for the next 4 years or whatever time you're with me, I will never, or I need you to trust, not agree. I need you to just trust that I will never put you in any situation that you might not encounter when you're out in the world doing something, and I will make sure that you're never genuinely harmed.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of trust, I feel like the reasonable person expectation is sort of like slowly decaying and getting patina on it, and it worries me because if a if harm can be defined as breaking down on stage because somebody you had nerves, if that's
Mm-hmm.
harm in the same way that getting beat up on the street because you're transgender is harm, as a teacher, that's where I have a hard time like being like, I think you're just nervous and you need to play the show.
Mm-hmm.
And you need
Mm-hmm.
to have a bad experience where you walk, and because you need to realize that your perception of what will happen to you is oversized and you're putting way too much importance on that particular feeling. And so sometimes
Mm-hmm.
the answer is sorry, jump with me. You're playing pieces of wood with me at 7 o'clock. There'll be 2,000 people here. Oh, no, no, yeah, we're not rehearsing. I'm going to do this and you're going to stop 6 beats after.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's terrifying, but sometimes that's the answer. And the older I get, the more I teach. Like, maybe that's where you and I are going to disagree, and we'll check back in 10 years to see how many students we've ruined. Um, but to me, I only say that because that's been my experience. The number of times I've walked on stage to play with John Medeski,
Mm-hmm.
horrifying, horrifying.
Yeah.
I've never felt more insecure about my ability to hang. But when I got done, he was just like, "Want to grab beer?" I was like, "Oh wait, you mean you don't hate me because I completely ruined your piece?" you know, and it was fine. It's just like, okay, all right. Now the next time I'm up there with him, I'm less afraid. And I think I'm just voicing like that's a struggle for me as a teacher.
Yeah.
Where's the ethical line for me there? What am I ethically bound to force my students to understand about the fears they have? What are real? What's not real? I mean, family trauma, a death in the family. Like I'm not. I've experienced that too, and I've had people say things to me in positions of authority that have been like, that was the wrong thing to say, but I'm a big boy and I'll move on. But like, so I'm very aware of that. But sometimes it's just like, I think you're afraid,
Hmm.
and you got
You know, I
you got
don't
to
think
not
it's, I
be.
don't honestly, like, I don't think this kind of situation has really come up for me. I don't think that
Mm,
I've been in a situation where I've made the claim that if you trust in the thing that we're about to do that is terrifying you, I guarantee it's going to work out. Like
not,
I've never been in that
I
situation,
wouldn't say work out, but
or that I would do no harm, right? Like I think um I just don't have the same level of confidence, I suppose, in my own
mm,
ability to read a situation and to know the sort of therapeutic value or lack thereof of a situation to make that happen. And you mentioned therapy. Yeah, I mean, that was like 15 years of my life. Like that was a long time to think about how I could successfully get out and do the thing that I most love to do and most want to do without, you know, going backwards, even a little bit, even a microscopic step back.
Hmm.
And you always do, of course, you always do.
Hmm.
But boy, these professionals for a decade and a half, fully focused,
Hmm.
there's a lot to understand about what people are carrying around. And I don't think I've been in an equivalent situation because um, I don't worry about the kids these days so much. There are things that I'm like, I wish people were in touch in a different way than some of the ways that people are maintaining contact with each other. But that's not for me to decide. I am generally pretty encouraged by my students. I'm encouraged by their advocacy for themselves in ways that I think we maybe disagree on a little bit. Um, I yeah, I think I reserve the right to change my mind about all these things, as you said earlier.
Yeah, for sure.
But if I'm being honest, like my sort of micro beefs with the way people operate in generations younger than my own are so far outweighed by the things that they have figured out, and further the work that they're going to need to do. Like I want to help them do that work more than I want to be like, turns out I was right about how much you were supposed to practice counterpoint. Like I'm not going to die on that hill. But no part of me wants to die on that hill. I just want to be like, what do you need? Because you have to carry forward um, the idea of living and working responsibly under these conditions. It's more for me, it's more like, what can I give you? I think you're saying that too. I think you're saying, I want to give you this tool. And what I think I need you to do is trust me and jump. I've not been in a situation where I felt like if somebody trusted me and jumped, I would give them the tool that they needed. You know,
I
I just
would,
don't really,
I
I
would,
don't
yeah.
really,
Well, and to be quite totally honest with you, as a friend that I have known for a while and have worked in intense educational situations,
yeah.
you need to give yourself a little bit more credit or you need to trust yourself a little bit more here, buddy, because like
Mm,
the one of the things that has been frustrating for me about teaching is I feel like I went into as a student and was like, I didn't really know. It's not like I knew chamber music was something I was pumped about.
yeah.
I knew steel drums was something I was pumped about, and I like to teach. But when I said I want to be a marimba soloist, and then
Hmm.
somebody was like, "Well, here's what you got to do," I would be like, "Okay, I clearly have to know a shitload of marimba solos, and I got to do this and this and this." Number of people in the last 13 years of SoSI, in my 16 years in So Percussion, that I've seen start a group and then have some major meltdown and
Hmm.
then not continue the group, I would say is in the low 20s.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Ethically now as a 41-year-old, I'm feeling less guilty about feeling like I pushed them into doing this, but also
Hmm.
questioning what it is I told them 13 years ago. What could I have said then that might have allowed for that meltdown to come a little later? you know,
Hmm.
because I think I mistaught how much of what So Percussion does actually is the 10,000 hours.
Hmm.
We're not good budget. I'm just making up budgets. I've learned how to do a spreadsheet over the last 13 years, but it's not like I didn't study QuickBooks. Like what I've done is I've spent 4 hours a day rehearsing with my bandmates for the first 10 years of So Percussion. And only now are we sort of like once a week, getting
Hmm.
together.
Hmm.
But I'm sorry, like if you can't, it's like that dumb thing. It's like if you can't actually play together for a whole show 4 or 5 times in a row, and the same audience
Hmm.
can come and see it 4 or 5 times in a row and see a representative version of that group every time,
Hmm.
you're not going to do it
Hmm.
in the way that we're doing it. Like you have to
Yeah.
understand, you need more at bats. You need to play a time. I'm sorry. The difference is we've just failed a lot more than you have, and we're better at it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's I wish I could go back. That's the one thing I wish I could go back. I want to. I wish I would impart more on those students of like, don't worry about budgets. Don't think
Hmm.
about the IRS. Do not think about QuickBooks. Do not think about stage plots. What a DI box is. Who cares what an XLR cable and what an SM57 is? What's phantom power? Doesn't matter. Practice with each other. Take your drums
Hmm.
out to the coffee shop and play. Go out to the square. Play. Pull somebody in your room. Play. Why? Because that's what we did. And now when I walk on stage with those three dum dums, it's the safest place in the world.
Hmm.
The place where Paul Robeson stood is the place
Yeah.
I feel the most comfort. Why? Because I have no worries what's going to happen with those three goofballs.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I want that for my students. Like, that's the thing I want. I want them, when they're doing the thing that actually brings them in the bacon, to
Yeah.
have zero fear and have a fucking blast doing it. And again, like, we could check it in 10 years and
Yeah, we
look at the
could.
bodies
I
we've left
mean,
behind us in our wake. But
I hope we do. I hope we check in more than that often. We'll keep like, you know, banging this drum, so to speak.
yeah, Andrea, before we wrap up here, do you have any final thoughts here? I've stolen an hour and 6 minutes of your life already, but I have
Has it been an
appreciated.
hour and 6 minutes? Wow,
Yes,
Josh.
time flies when you're chewing fat.
Time flies when the fat gets chewed. Yeah.
Um,
Anything more I want to share? Hmm. Well,
or I can ask
I've
you one final question as well.
why don't you ask me a final question? Because I can't think of anything I want to share.
What is something you were forced to learn about yourself this year that
Hmm.
you are not taking forward with you?
Oh, interesting. Not taking forward in what sense? Like something I want to kind of let
Well,
go?
something like a skill set or something you had to get good at, that
Oh,
now
yeah.
moving out of the pandemic, you're like, yeah, I'm good. I don't need to take that with me. I want to take that with me. Even if I needed it, I don't want to. I don't want to bring it with me.
That's a really good question. Huh. So the logistical things that I had to learn, okay, what I would rather not take with me is the idea that when I teach a class or do anything, and a bunch of people are looking at me and I'm getting no feedback from them at all, and I feel terrible, the sort of self-talk after that is not a tool that I'm going to enjoy any longer.
Hmm.
That's been really hard. I find teaching really energizing and invigorating. I love to be in a classroom with students, and I did not so much feel that on Zoom very often at all. And so the thing I had to learn was this sort of, it gets back to what we're talking about, how to divorce myself from
Mm.
the feedback loop that encourages me to do what I'm doing. That's something I'd like to set down.
I agree with you 100%. If you'd asked me the same thing, I had a hard time with the ethics of Zoom. I'll be honest with
Hmm.
you. And again, this goes to the access thing. It goes to people's different I mean, we're all of a sudden peering into everybody's bedroom or their living room or
Yeah,
whatever. So
right.
I understand. I get it. But the ethics of not being able to require a student to have their camera on
Hmm.
was really disempowering to everybody. It
Hmm.
actually it actually disengages every party from each other. And like, it's like we sort of lost this idea that you have to have some sort of buy-in. Like, your tuition dollars aren't the only reason you're in the room. Like,
Hmm.
you have to have a little more skin in the game. Like, show us your face. Let me hear your
Hmm.
voice. Over time, it became unethical to ask that of students, because all a
Sure.
student had to say was, I have anxiety, or I have, and it's like, hey, bro, so do I. I'm here on a Zoom screen with nobody,
Hmm.
and it's crushing, crushing.
You know what though, Josh? I mean, I hear what you're saying. We're gonna have another fight here on the air, but here's my thinking on this. What I feel like my job in that situation for me, yeah, it was really hard to do that work, and I felt really, maybe disempowered is the word. I felt really ineffective. I felt
Hmm.
really alone. I felt like I wasn't getting what I usually get. But I started thinking about, we're in a really sticky situation, a really difficult situation. These students are bearing, I believe we're bearing the brunt of it. And so my thought was like, how do I facilitate their ability to continue to function and to show up? And if they want to keep their camera off, like, I was not dying on that hill. I was like, look, I'm going to trust you to do the thing that you need. And if you want to you know, take advantage of that or whatever, like that's I'm gonna trust you. And if you tell me your camera's off, your camera's off. And it's like no questions asked is kind of where I was at with it. Yeah, did I like looking out at all those boxes that had just names in them? Like, not really, not really at all. But I saw my position as a helper and not a and I think what you're saying is like that's how you would be able to offer your help, right? Like that what you're saying is that encouraging you to step out of that, turn your camera on, let me hear your voice, show me your living room or whatever, that is what you're regarding as the work that you can do. And I totally understand that.
Well,
But the thing I didn't regard that as the work that I could do.
yeah,
I
no,
wasn't like,
and to be clear,
yeah,
I wasn't somebody who was like, turn your cameras on, but it was
yeah.
the thing that would have made learning better. I can
Yeah,
say
I mean, I
that.
fought back when so I was being observed over Zoom, right?
Mm,
And I'd be observed, and people would be like, "I think the cameras are all out, cameras are off," and I'd be like, "Yes, they are," And I didn't love the idea that I should say say something different about that.
yeah, it's
It's
just
weird, but it's funny. It's like it's such a small. It seems like such a small thing, but I think this is the crux of where we're kind of like entangling on these things. This
mhm.
kind of idea of where does your let me start over. I think you feel incredibly responsible to your students, and like you can offer them a particular set of things that have that there's a buy-in prerequisite that is very particular to the Josh Quillen method that is not the buy-in prerequisite for mine.
Mm.
But maybe we'll be in another global health geopolitical crisis, and my thing will get threatened in some way, and we can have that
Well,
conversation.
I think we actually the Venn diagram of our two approaches, I think, overlaps way more than our negativity bias about our
Yeah.
disagreement is
No, I
allowing
think
us to
that's
believe.
right. Yeah, I think that's
Um,
totally right.
the thing for me, I've been thinking a lot about shared spaces
Yeah.
and what the definition of that. Zoom became a shared space. Zoom is our classroom, and when you
Yeah.
walk in a classroom, you have to agree not to fart. You have to agree not to burp out loud. Like there's things you can't do that you could do in your home.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden your home is this shared space in a weird digital way.
Hmm.
And I think that currency, I think the student loses more than the teacher in that
Mm.
moment. Now, again, there's other issues. There are people on the spectrum that have problem. I get it, but I
Yeah.
would say for me, the thing moving forward, no hybrid classes.
Yeah. I would
If
like to be in body as much as possible.
if
I,
I
I just,
could
even
not,
just movement through the space, right? Like it was so weird not to be able to move through the space. Even now, it's like, I want to get up. I want to walk with you. I want to like wave my hands around more and stuff. It was so confining in those ways. And yeah, all the ways that the cameras were off just meant that the little bit of bounce back you could sometimes get wasn't happening. And so that skill that I developed was to be like, it's okay. It's gonna be okay. Let's go pet the dog,
yeah, there's
and I'll set that one down.
yeah, this it's a yeah. I feel like I didn't realize that I didn't actually. And sorry, this is going to sound terribly insensitive. I don't want to care about if a student of mine has an autoimmune disorder
Hmm.
because I want I need that person in the room. Like, and if that person's not in the room, I'm what they're doing is watching a steel band rehearsal because I can't actually teach both.
Hmm.
And then the person is paying $25,000 a semester to watch a steel band rehearsal. That is an abdication. That's an ethical problem for me.
Yeah, sure,
And
sure.
so moving forward, I feel like if I could be like no Zoom anymore
Yeah.
because the product is better.
Mm.
And if that means I have no students with autoimmune disorders for the rest of my life and I get labeled a whatever, like, that's the ethical quandary I'm having because I have
Sure.
students with those disorders and I don't want to disenfranchise them. On the other hand, they've just watched me run a rehearsal for a year and I don't think they got a whole lot out of it. Or
Mm.
maybe I'm discounting what they got out of it, but
Yeah, or maybe you need to trust them to know what they need and not do maybe they'll be like, you know what? I can't be in the room with Josh, and I don't think I'm getting the thing that he would offer me. And maybe the solution isn't for them to then come into the room. Maybe the solution is for them to come to my studio where their camera can be
are you
off.
poaching?
And
Are you poaching
I
my
am.
students?
I'm stealing your folk, is what's happening.
All right.
Carlton College, Northfield, Minnesota.
The greatest
Direct
of all
pipeline from
poachers.
NYU.
Well, listen, Andrea. On that note, on that poaching note, I will let you go. We're now at an hour and 15, and it's getting hot in my room. It's 9,000 degrees here, and I don't have this AC on, and I'm currently a hot mess, bro. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna go sit in the cold room for a bit.
It was
Um,
great to see you, Josh. Thanks for the conversation. I love that we got to connect this way.
yeah,
If
likewise,
if
likewise.
it means record's got to be on, let's do this, man. Also, I
Uh,
wish you'd had your camera on this time. It was kind of unnerving, but whatever you got to do.
yeah, I mean, imagine if I did every podcast like this.
Oh, I like that picture of you actually.
Yeah, that's what it's like to study with Josh Quillen if I just had my thing on all the time. But, well, hey, Andrea, one final thing. You
Yeah,
look like you've lost weight, my friend.
it's true. I noomed.
You noomed. Oh, I know what
Do you
you're
know
talking
what
about. Yeah,
noom
yeah,
is?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I did. So on Super Bowl Sunday, we had some friends over and we got some pizza. And I mean, I was straight up like taking pizza from children, and I was like, "Look, man, we got to be in a healthier relationship here." Like I just elbowed that kid for that piece of pizza,
I pushed a kid in the swimming pool to get
Yeah,
his pizza.
Max. I mean, Max will be like, "Hey, where's the pizza?" And I'm like, "Sorry, man. It's I don't want to do that." Anyway, yeah. So after Super Bowl Sunday, I joined Noom, and I've been running, and I've been eating well. I've been trying to do things, a little differently.
Well, it's paying off, bro. Stay on the
Thanks.
grind.
It's because it makes me feel good.
All right, man. Love you. Take it easy, and we'll chat soon,
Love
okay?
you. To be continued.
All
Bye.
right. See you, buddy.
Bye, pal.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. This podcast is brought to you by Liquid Drum, liquiddrum.com down in Waco, Texas. My good friend Todd Meehan runs an amazing percussion company down there. Great merch, great content. Check him out, liquiddrum.com. Also, Kyle Dunleavy, dunleavypans.com, DUNLEAVY pans.com. Kyle Dunleavy makes and builds all the steel drums that I perform and teach on in So Percussion, as well as at NYU and Princeton. He's an amazing tuner, builder, just a really nice guy, very dependable. Check him out. If you are interested at all in steel pan advocacy, want to learn more about the goings-on in pan in Brooklyn, check out paninmotion.com. My good friend Kendall Williams, Jerry Guy, Trisha Guy, and Arisha John run an amazing organization called paninmotion.com. Check them out. And finally, Andrea Mazzariello runs an amazing clothing apparel company in Brooklyn that is steel pan centric. You can check him out at mangochow, CHOW, clothing.com. I own a bunch of his shirts. They're amazing, very stylish, beautifully made. Check them out. mangochowclothing.com. Okay, hope you're well. Talk to you soon. Bye.